You're in the wrong line, sweetie. Economy is all the way in the back. That was the first thing the flight attendant hissed at 19-year-old Nia, blocking the entrance to the first-class cabin. Her eyes scanned Nia's oversized hoodie and worn-out sneakers with pure disgust. Every wealthy passenger in the queue watched, snickering, as the crew member snatched the boarding pass from Nia's hand, convinced she had stolen it. They thought she was a broke teenager trying to scam a free ride. They had no idea that the $80 million jet they were stepping onto was technically her birthday present, and the man the pilot was threatening to call security on. He wasn't just her dad. He was the one who signed their paychecks. What happened next wasn't just justice. It was a masterclass in humility that grounded an entire crew for life. The automatic doors of JFK International Airport's Terminal 4 slid open, letting in a gust of biting November wind. Nia zipped her charcoal hoodie up to her chin, burying her hands in the pockets of her sweatpants. She looked exhausted, and frankly, she felt it. She had just finished a grueling final exam week at Columbia University and hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours. All she wanted was to sink into a lie-flat seat, put on her noise-cancelling headphones, and wake up in London. She walked toward the check-in counter for Aerolux, the transatlantic airline, known for its gold standard service. Today, however, Nia wasn't looking for gold. She just wanted peace. She bypassed the snaking line of frustrated travelers in the economy lane and ducked under the velvet rope marking the first-class Blaho's priority lane. "Excuse me." "Hey." The sharp voice came from behind her. A middle-aged man in a tailored Armani suit, dragging a Louis Vuitton rolling bag, glared at her. "The line starts back there, kid. This is for priority passengers. Can't you read?" Nia paused, turning slowly. "I know," she said softly, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "I'm on the flight." The man scoffed, looking her up and down. "Sure you are. Probably standby or trying to beg for an upgrade. Do us a favor and don't hold up the people who actually paid for their tickets." Nia didn't have the energy to argue. She just turned back to the counter where the agent, a young woman named Chloe, looked up. Chloe's eyes widened slightly at Nia's appearance, messy bun, no makeup, baggy clothes, but she smiled professionally. "Passport and boarding pass, please." Nia handed over her passport and tapped her phone against the scanner. The machine beeped a cheerful green tone. "Welcome, Ms. Sterling. Seat 1A." Chloe blinked at the screen. She looked at the name, then back at the girl in the hoodie. The name Sterling carried weight in the aviation industry, but specifically regarding Aerolux, it was royalty. The airline had been acquired 3 years ago by Sterling Global Holdings. But surely, this disheveled student couldn't be related to Tobias Sterling, the billionaire CEO. "Is everything okay, Ms. Sterling?" Chloe asked, her voice dropping to a respectful whisper. "Just tired." Nia managed a weak smile. "Is the lounge open? I just want to grab a water before boarding." "Of course. Right this way." As Nia walked away, the man in the Armani suit huffed loudly. Unbelievable. They let anyone in these days if they cry a sob story. Nia ignored him. She was used to it. Her father Tobias had taught her from a young age that wealth didn't need to be loud. Real power, he always said, is silence. Let them underestimate you. It makes the victory sweeter. She spent 20 minutes in the lounge sipping sparkling water and texting her dad. "Boarding now. See you in London for dinner." The reply was instant. "Can't wait, sweet pea. Safe flight. I'll be tracking the bird." Nia smiled. She gathered her backpack and headed to gate B32, The massive Boeing 787 Dreamliner sat outside the glass, gleaming under the airport lights. It was a beautiful machine. She remembered when her dad bought the fleet. He had let her pick the interior color scheme for first class, a deep, regal midnight blue with gold accents. She approached the gate. Priority boarding had just been called. Standing at the jet bridge entrance was the lead flight attendant. Her name tag read Jessica. She had blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and a layer of foundation that cracked when she frowned, which she was doing right now directly at Nia. Nia held out her phone to scan her pass. Jessica didn't look at the phone. She looked at Nia's sneakers, then her hoodie, then her face. "Economy boarding hasn't started yet," Jessica said, her voice dripping with condescension. She didn't even make eye contact, her gaze fixed on the businessman behind Nia, the same one from the check-in line. "Sir, please step forward. Sorry about the hold-up." "Excuse me," Nia said, stepping firmly in front of the scanner. "I'm in first class." Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a gatekeeper enjoying her tiny ounce of power. "Let's be real, honey. You're not. Now step aside before I call security. You're blocking the actual customers." "Scan the pass," Nia said, her voice hardening. Jessica rolled her eyes, grabbed the scanner, and aggressively aimed it at Nia's phone, clearly expecting the red error light of a rejected ticket. Beep. Seat 1A. First class. The machine flashed green. Jessica stared at it. She shook the scanner as if it were broken and hit the reset button. "Must be a system glitch," Jessica muttered, more to the businessman behind Nia than to Nia herself. She glared at Nia. "Fine, go. But don't think you can cause trouble on my plane just because the computer made a mistake. I'll be watching you." Nia walked down the jet bridge, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a slow, boiling anger. She wasn't just a passenger. She was technically the host, and the staff was already failing the hospitality check. The first-class cabin of the Dreamliner was a sanctuary of luxury. There were only 8 suites each, with a sliding privacy door, a 32-inch 4K screen, and lie-flat beds dressed in Egyptian cotton. Nia found seat 1A. It was the prime spot, front left, maximum privacy. She tossed her backpack into the overhead bin and settled into the soft leather seat. She pulled her hood down, revealing her braided hair, and sighed. Finally. She closed her eyes, ready to drift off before takeoff. "Ahem." Nia didn't move. "Excuse me." The voice was louder this time. Nia opened one eye. Standing in the aisle was a woman who looked like she had walked out of a reality TV show about rich housewives. She was wearing a fur coat in November indoors and holding a glass of champagne that she must have grabbed from the galley herself. Behind her stood Jessica, the flight attendant. "Yes?" Nia asked. "You're in my seat," the woman in the fur coat snapped. "1A. My husband always books 1A for me. I think you're confused." Nia checked her phone again. "No confusion. My boarding pass says 1A. Jessica stepped forward, crossing her arms. The fake smile was gone, replaced by a look of open hostility. "Miss, let's not make a scene. Mrs. van der Hoeven is a Diamond Medallion member. She flies with us weekly. There has obviously been a double booking error, and frankly, looking at you." She paused, letting her eyes drift over Nia's hoodie again. "It's clear which ticket is the valid one. Are you serious?" Nia sat up straighter. "I have a valid ticket." I scanned in. The machine turned green. If there's a double booking, check the manifest. I don't need to check the manifest to know that you don't belong in a $5,000 suite, Jessica spat. Now look, I have an open seat in 34B. It's a middle seat in economy, but it'll get you to London. Take your bag and move. Now. Naya felt the heat rising in her cheeks. It wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was shock. I paid for this seat. Naya lied smoothly. She hadn't paid, of course, her dad owned the plane, but the principle was the same. I'm not moving to 34B. Listen, you little brat, Mrs. van der Hoven interjected, stepping closer, her perfume overpowering the cabin air. My husband owns a chain of hotels. We are personal friends with the vice president of this airline. If you don't get your trashy little self out of my seat, I will have you banned from flying ever again. Naya looked at Mrs. van der Hoven, then at Jessica. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Okay. You want to talk about who knows who. Let me make a call. Jessica laughed a high-pitched mocking sound. Oh, who are you going to call your boyfriend? Your mummy. Put the phone away. Electronic devices must be in airplane mode. You are disobeying a direct order from a crew member. That is a federal offense. I'm not disobeying, Naya said calmly. I'm clarifying. That's it, Jessica snapped. She turned toward the cockpit. Captain, we have a situation. A moment later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Brad emerged. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a jawline that suggested he spent more time in the gym than studying flight paths. He looked annoyed to be disturbed during his pre-flight checks. What is it, Jessica? We're trying to push back in 10. This passenger. Jessica pointed a manicured finger at Nia, like she was pointing at a rodent. Refuses to vacate Mrs. van der Hoven's seat. She's belligerent. She's disruptive, and I suspect her ticket is fraudulent. Captain Brad loomed over Nia's seat. He didn't ask Nia for her side of the story. He didn't ask to see her boarding pass. He just saw a young black girl in a hoodie arguing with a wealthy white woman and his senior flight attendant. The calculus in his head was instant and prejudiced. Miss, the captain boomed, his voice projecting so the whole cabin could hear. On my aircraft, the flight attendant's word is law. If she says you move, you move. If you don't, I will have the airport police drag you off this plane. And I don't think you want a federal record at your age. Naya stared at him. She saw the name tag, Captain B. Miller. Captain Miller. Naya said, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands. I'm asking you politely to check your iPad. Look at the passenger manifest for seat 1A. That is all I am asking. I don't have time to play games with entitled teenagers. Brad shouted, his face turning red. He grabbed Nia's backpack from the overhead bin and threw it into the aisle. It landed with a heavy thud. Get out, now, or you're going to jail. Naya looked at her bag on the floor. She looked at the smirking Mrs. van der Hoven. She looked at Jessica, who was beaming with triumph. Nia stood up slowly. She picked up her bag. Fine, she whispered. I'll get off. Good choice, Jessica sneered. And don't bother trying to rebook. I'm flagging your passport. Naya walked to the door of the plane, but she didn't turn right toward the terminal. She stopped at the entryway, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. You're not allowed to make calls on the jet bridge, Jessica yelled, chasing after her. Naya held up a hand, silencing her. The phone rang once, twice. Hello, sweet pea. Everything okay? Her father's deep, warm voice filled her ear. No, Dad. Naya said, her voice trembling slightly loud enough for Jessica and the captain to hear. I need you to pause the board meeting. We have a problem with your plane. Specifically Flight AL-402 out of JFK. What kind of problem? Tobias Sterling's voice shifted instantly from father to CEO. It was ice cold. The crew just threw me off, Naya said, locking eyes with the captain. They assaulted my property, profiled me, and denied me the seat you booked. Captain Miller and lead attendant Jessica. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A terrifying, heavy silence. Put the captain on the phone, Tobias said. Naya held the phone out to Captain Brad. It's for you. Brad laughed nervously. I'm not talking to your daddy. I strongly suggest you do, Nia said, unless you want to explain to the FAA why you refused a direct order from the owner of the airline. Captain Brad Miller looked at the sleek smartphone in Nia's hand like it was a venomous snake. He let out a sigh of exaggerated patience, playing to the audience of first-class passengers who were watching the drama unfold with amusement. Fine, Brad grunted. I'll play your little game. He snatched the phone from Nia's hand, putting it to his ear with a smirk. This is Captain Miller. Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but your daughter is disrupting a federal flight. I'm about 30 seconds away from having her arrested, so unless you want to post bail, tell her to... Captain Miller. The voice on the other end cut him off. It wasn't a shout. It was a baritone rumble, calm and terrifyingly precise. This is Tobias Sterling, CEO of Sterling Global Holdings. You are currently standing on the bridge of a Boeing 787-10 tail number the November 884 Alpha Lima. Is that correct? Brad froze. His smirk faltered. He looked up at the placard above the cockpit door. N884AL. It was private information. Public tracking apps had the flight number, sure. But the specific tail registration for this exact rotation wasn't something a random dad would know off the top of his head unless he was looking at the company's internal scheduling grid. Brad stammered, his grip on the phone tightening. How do you know the tail number? Because I bought it, Tobias replied. I signed the purchase order for that aircraft in Seattle 3 years ago. I also signed the contract renewal for the pilots' union last month, the one that gave you your 5% raise. Do you recall that signature, Captain? Brad felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. He looked at Nia. The girl in the hoodie was leaning against the wall of the jet bridge, checking her fingernails, looking completely unbothered. She didn't look like a scammer anymore. She looked like someone who held the keys to the castle. Mr. Sterling, Brad whispered. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. That's correct, Tobias said. Now I am looking at the live roster for this flight. I see a Naya Sterling booked in seat 1A. That is my daughter. And you just threw her property into the aisle and threatened her with arrest. Do I have the facts right? Sir, it was a misunderstanding. Brad began, his voice cracking. We thought she was dressed in... There was a confusion with the priority line. I don't care if she was dressed in a garbage bag. Tobias snapped his voice, finally raising an octave sharp enough to make Brad wince. She is a paying customer. In fact, she is the only person on that plane who doesn't just pay for a seat. She pays for the fuel, the maintenance, and your salary. You have insulted my family. You have humiliated a passenger. And you have violated the core code of conduct for Aerolux. I can fix this, Brad pleaded, turning his back to the passengers so they wouldn't see his shaking hands. I'll get her seat back. We can resolve this right now. No, you can't, Tobias said coldly. You wanted to exercise your authority, Captain Fine. Let's exercise mine. You are not flying that plane. Brad's heart stopped. Sir, I am grounding the flight, Tobias declared. "I want the engines off. I want the bridge retracted. Nobody goes anywhere until I speak to the station manager. Do not move the aircraft. If you push back from that gate, I will ensure you never fly so much as a kite again. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Brad choked out. "I understand. Hand the phone back to my daughter." Brad walked back to Naya like a man walking to the gallows. He handed the phone over with 2 hands, his head bowed. He wants to talk to you," Brad mumbled. Naya took the phone. "Hey, Dad. I'm sorry you had to deal with this trash, sweetie." Tobias said, his voice softening instantly. "I've called the JFK station manager. He's literally running to the gate right now. I'm also having the chief of operations for the East Coast wake up. Sit tight. Watch the show." "Thanks, Dad." Naya hung up and slipped the phone into her pocket. She looked at Captain Brad. He was pale, staring at the floor. "Well," Naya asked, "are you going to drag me off, or can I get my bag?" Brad didn't answer. He turned to Jessica, who was still standing by the cabin door, looking confused and annoyed that the trash hadn't been removed yet. "Jessica," Brad croaked. "Did you call security?" Jessica asked, hands on her hips. "Get her out of here so we can serve champagne." "Shut the door," Brad said, his voice hollow. "We're not leaving." "What?" Jessica's eyes widened. "What do you mean we're not leaving? We have a slot time." "The flight is grounded," Brad said louder this time, "by the owner." The announcement hit the cabin like a bomb. Captain Brad had retreated into the cockpit, presumably to have a panic attack, leaving the cabin crew to deal with the fallout. The fasten seatbelt sign was turned off, and the harsh overhead lights were turned up to full brightness. "Ladies and gentlemen," the intercom crackled, Brad's voice sounding shaky and weak. This is the captain. We have been ordered to hold at the gate due to an administrative issue with ownership. We are currently grounded until further notice. We apologize for the inconvenience." The first-class cabin erupted. Mrs. van der Hoeven, who was comfortably settled in seat 1A, Nia's seat, slammed her champagne flute down on the tray table so hard the stem snapped. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "I have a gala in London tonight. What do you mean, administrative issue?" She unbuckled her belt and stormed toward the galley where Jessica and Naya were standing. Nia hadn't moved. She was leaning against the galley cart, arms crossed, watching the chaos with a calm expression. "You took to my name." Mrs. van der Hoeven pointed a diamond-encrusted finger at Nia. "This is your fault, isn't it? You and your little phone call held us up." Jessica, trying to salvage the situation, and her own ego stepped in. She still didn't believe, or didn't want to believe, that the girl in the hoodie was actually important. She assumed the captain had just been spooked by a legal threat. "Mrs. van der Hoeven, please sit down," Jessica said, though her glare was directed at Naya. "We are dealing with the disruptive passenger. It seems she's managed to trick the system or cause some confusion with dispatch." Jessica turned to Nia, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I don't know who you hired to impersonate the CEO on the phone, but when the real police get here, you are going to be in so much trouble for fraud. Impersonating an airline executive is a felony." Naya laughed. She actually laughed. "You think I hired an actor? You really are committed to digging this hole, aren't you?" "Jessica, don't speak to me," Jessica snapped. "You should be in handcuffs." "Well, why aren't I?" Naya challenged. "If I'm a fraud, why is the plane grounded? Why is the captain hiding in the cockpit?" Before Jessica could answer, a commotion came from the jet bridge. The sound of heavy running footsteps thundered down the metal ramp. Everyone turned to look. Bursting through the cabin door was a man Nia recognized. It was Mr. Henderson, the JFK station manager for Aerolux. He was a frantic mess. His tie was crooked, he was out of breath, and he was holding a walkie-talkie that was buzzing with chatter. Behind him were 2 Port Authority police officers, but they weren't looking at Nia. They were looking at the crew. "Where is she?" Henderson gasped, scanning the area. His eyes bypassed Mrs. van der Hoeven, bypassed Jessica, and landed squarely on Nia. His face transformed from panic to pure deference. He rushed over to her, practically bowing. "Miss Sterling," Henderson panted. "Miss Sterling, I am so sorry. Your father called me directly. I came as fast as I could." The silence in the cabin was deafening. Mrs. van der Hoeven's mouth fell open. Jessica took a step back, her back hitting the galley wall. "Mr. Henderson," Nia said coolly. "Good to see you again, although I wish the circumstances were better." "This is unacceptable," Henderson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He turned to Jessica. "Why is Miss Sterling standing in the galley? Why is she not in her seat?" Jessica stammered. Her brain was misfiring. Mrs. van der Hoeven was, she gave my seat away," Nia said, pointing to Mrs. van der Hoeven. "And then she and the captain threw my bag in the dirt and told me to get off the plane because I didn't look like I belonged in first class." Henderson turned slowly to Jessica. His face was purple with rage. "You did what? Do you have any idea who this is? This is Tobias Sterling's daughter. She is the heir to the company you work for." Jessica looked at Nia. Really looked at her. She saw the resemblance now, the eyes, the jawline. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her knees actually buckled, and she had to grab the beverage cart to stay upright. I didn't know," Jessica whispered. "She was wearing a hoodie. She didn't look like what?" Nia interrupted, stepping closer. "She didn't look wealthy. She didn't look white." "Say it, Jessica. What didn't I look like?" Jessica couldn't speak. She was trembling. "And you," Henderson barked, turning to Mrs. van der Hoeven. "Ma'am, get out of that seat, immediately." I am a Diamond member," Mrs. van der Hoeven sputtered, clutching her pearls. "You can't talk to me like that. I demand compensation. You are sitting in a stolen seat," Henderson cut her off, "and you are harassing the owner's family. If you do not vacate seat 1A in 10 seconds, I will have these officers remove you for theft of service and disorderly conduct. And I will personally revoke your Diamond status before you even get off the bridge." Mrs. van der Hoeven looked at the police officers. They stepped forward, hands resting on their belts. The fight went out of her instantly. She grabbed her bag and her coat, scrambling out of the seat. She tried to scurry past Nia without making eye contact. "Wait," Nia said. Mrs. van der Hoeven froze. "You forgot something," Nia said. She pointed to the floor where Captain Brad had thrown Nia's backpack earlier. "My bag. Pick it up." "What? You cheered when the captain threw it," Nia said. "You said I was trash. So since you're standing there, pick up my bag and put it in the overhead bin. Please." Mrs. van der Hoeven looked around. The other passengers, businessmen, celebrities, were watching. The humiliation was palpable. But the police were watching too. Trembling, the woman in the fur coat bent down. She picked up the worn-out college backpack. She lifted it and placed it gently into the bin above seat 1A. "Thank you," Nia said. "Now you can leave." Mrs. van der Hoeven fled the plane, sobbing. Nia sat down in her reclaimed seat 1A. She looked up at Henderson. Now, about the crew. I don't feel safe flying with people who judge passengers based on their skin color and clothes. Do you? Absolutely not, Miss Sterling, Henderson said. He grabbed his walkie-talkie. Dispatch, this is Henderson. I need a reserve flight crew to gate B-32 immediately. Full replacement. Pilots and cabin crew. And bring HR down here. I have some badges to collect. Captain Brad finally emerged from the cockpit. He looked like a ghost. He saw Henderson. He saw the police. He saw Naya sitting in the seat he had ordered her out of. Mr. Henderson. Brad began, his voice weak. Save it, Brad, Henderson said. Pack your bag. You're relieved of duty. You too, Jessica. Get off the plane. But Naya raised a hand. Wait. Everyone froze. Dad said he wanted to handle this personally, Nia said, checking her phone. He's sending a proxy, someone who handles personnel issues for the holding company. They'll be here in 5 minutes. Nia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I think Brad and Jessica should wait right here until they arrive. It wouldn't be polite to leave before the exit interview. Brad and Jessica exchanged a look of pure terror. Being fired by a station manager was one thing. Being handled by Sterling Global Corporate was something else entirely. They were about to become unhireable in the entire industry. The first-class cabin had become a courtroom. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the auxiliary power unit. Captain Brad Miller and Jessica stood by the cockpit door, stripping off their ties and scarves, as if the very uniform was burning their skin. They looked small. The arrogance that had filled the space just 20 minutes ago was gone, replaced by the hollow, sick look of people watching their careers disintegrate in real time. A black sedan pulled up onto the tarmac below, visible through the open cabin door. 2 minutes later, footsteps echoed on the jet bridge again. But these weren't the frantic steps of Mr. Henderson. These were slow, rhythmic, terrifyingly calm click-clack of high heels. A woman stepped onto the plane. She was dressed in a sharp, white suit that cost more than Jessica's annual salary. She held a tablet in one hand and a thin file in the other. Ms. Stone, Henderson said, standing up straighter. I didn't know you were in New York. Victoria Stone, Nia whispered to herself. She knew her. Victoria was Sterling Global's chief legal officer. Her father called her the Scalpel because she removed problems with surgical precision. Victoria didn't look at Henderson. She walked past him, past the crew, and went straight to Naya. She didn't bow or scrape. She simply nodded, a gesture of equal to equal. Naya, your father sends his regards. He's monitoring the situation from London. Thanks, Victoria, Nia said. I think the crew was just leaving. Not yet, Victoria said, her voice smooth and cold as glass. She turned to face Brad and Jessica. Mr. Sterling requested a forensic audit of this incident before dismissal. I'm here to deliver the findings. She tapped her tablet. Captain Bradley Miller, 10 years with Aerolux. 3 formal complaints regarding tone with ground staff, all dismissed by your union rep. Today, however, you violated Article 4 of your contract. Gross misconduct involving a high-value co-clientele. You also attempted to involve law enforcement under false pretenses. I was protecting the flight, Brad stammered. You were protecting your ego, Victoria corrected. As of 2 minutes ago, your type rating for the Boeing 787 has been suspended pending an FAA review, which I will personally oversee. Sterling Global is also suing you for the cost of this delay. Fuel slot fees, ground crew overtime. It comes to about $45,000. We will be deducting that from your pension fund. Brad gasped. "You can't do that." "Read your contract, Captain. The negligence clause. You're lucky we don't sue you for the brand damage." Victoria turned her gaze to Jessica. Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Please," she sobbed. "I have a mortgage. I didn't know it was her. If I knew—" "Stop," Victoria said. She didn't raise her voice, but the word hit like a slap. "That is the problem, Jessica. If it had been anyone else, someone without a famous last name, you would have gotten away with it. You humiliated a young woman because of how she dressed and the color of her skin. You are a liability to this company." Victoria handed Jessica a piece of paper. "This is a notice of termination for cause. It is effective immediately. It also includes a lifetime ban from flying on any airline owned by Sterling Global or its partners. You will never work in aviation again. I've already flagged your file in the National Recruitment Database." "You're ruining my life!" Jessica screamed, her composure finally breaking. "No." Naya spoke up from her seat. She looked at Jessica with pity, not hate. "You ruined it yourself when you decided that your power was more important than my dignity. You bet against the wrong person. Now you have to pay the debt." Victoria pointed to the door. "Badges, now!" With shaking hands, Brad and Jessica unclipped their ID badges. They placed them in Victoria's extended hand. "Escort them off the property," Victoria said to the police officers. "If they return, arrest them for trespassing." The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute heavy and suffocating. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a luxury flight. It was the stunned silence of a courtroom after a guilty verdict. Victoria Stone stood in the aisle, her hand extended, waiting. To Captain Brad Miller and Jessica, that manicured hand looked like the Grim Reaper's scythe. "Your badges," Victoria repeated, her voice cutting through the air like a razor, "and your airport security clearance cards. You won't be needing access to the sterile area anymore." Brad's hands were shaking so violently he couldn't undo the clip on his shirt. He fumbled with the plastic, his face a mask of red-hot humiliation. This was a man who had walked through terminals for 10 years, with his head held high, soaking in the admiration of strangers. Now he was being stripped of his identity in front of an audience. With a final pathetic snap, the badge came loose. He dropped it into Victoria's palm. It made a hollow plastic sound. Jessica was next. She wasn't just shaking. She was hyperventilating. She unpinned her wings, the golden wings she had posted on Instagram just that morning with the caption, "Mashed Office View," and handed them over. She looked naked without them. Just a woman in a polyester suit who had made a terrible, life-altering mistake. "Officers," Victoria said, turning to the Port Authority police, "please escort these civilians off the aircraft. Ensure they are walked directly to the curbside pickup area. They are not permitted to stop at crew services or lockers." Civilians. The word hung in the air. They weren't crew anymore. They were trespassers. The walk down the aisle was the longest journey of their lives. As the police flanked them, nudging them toward the exit, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted violently. The passengers, the wealthy elites, the celebrities, the business tycoons who had snickered at Naya's hoodie just 30 minutes ago, suddenly found their moral compass. "Disgusting behavior," a man in row 2 muttered loudly, holding up his phone to record Brad's face as he passed. "I can't believe they treated her like that," whispered a woman who had previously rolled her eyes at Nia. "Good riddance," hissed the businessman, who had told Nia she was in the wrong line at the gate. Nia watched this display with a cold, detached fascination. It was the ultimate hypocrisy. These people weren't outraged because of the injustice. They were outraged because they realized they had backed the loser. They were performing morality for the benefit of the billionaire's daughter. Nia didn't look at the passengers. She kept her eyes locked on the disgraced crew. As Jessica passed seat 1A, she stumbled. Her heel caught on the carpet, and she grabbed the back of Nia's seat to steady herself. She looked down at Nia. Her eyes were red, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading terror. "Miss Sterling!" Jessica choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, I didn't know. If I had known—" Nia didn't blink. She didn't yell. She simply leaned back in her leather seat, looking every inch the royalty she was. "That is exactly the problem, Jessica," Nia said softly. "You treat people based on who you think they are. You treat the rich like gods and the poor like garbage. You don't regret what you did. You regret who you did it to." "Let's go, ma'am," the police officer said, gripping Jessica's arm firmly. Jessica let out a sob and was dragged away, disappearing into the jet bridge. Captain Brad didn't even look up. He stared at his shoes. A broken man as he was marched out behind her. The heavy cabin door thudded shut. The sound was final. The toxicity had been sealed out. Henderson, the station manager, let out a massive exhale, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. He looked at the remaining passengers, then at Nia. "Miss Sterling," Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. "The relief crew is already coming up the stairs. Captain Hayes is one of our best. I promise you the rest of this flight will be flawless." "I'm sure it will be," Nia said. She looked around the cabin. The other passengers were now looking at her with hungry, sycophantic smiles. The man in the Armani suit across the aisle gave her a thumbs up. "Way to stick it to them," he called out. "I knew something was wrong with that captain the moment I saw him." Nia just stared at him until his smile faltered and he looked away. She put her noise-cancelling headphones on, signaling that the show was over. She wasn't interested in their fake alliance. Moments later, the new crew boarded. The difference was palpable. Captain Hayes was a woman in her 50s, with a sharp, kind face and an air of quiet competence. She didn't march in like a dictator. She walked in like a leader. She stopped at Nia's seat. She didn't bow, and she didn't grovel. She extended a hand. "Ms. Sterling," Hayes said professionally. "I've been briefed. I'm sorry for the delay and the distress. We're going to get you to London safely and quickly. If you need anything, my door is open." "Thank you, Captain," Nia said, shaking her hand. "Just get us in the air. I've had enough of New York for one day." Hayes nodded and headed to the cockpit. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful hum that vibrated through the floor. The safety demonstration began, but this time the flight attendants were attentive, making eye contact with every passenger. Their smiles genuine, their anxiety about the VIP in 1A translating into impeccable service. The plane pushed back from the gate. As it taxied toward the runway, Nia looked out of the window. The rain had started to fall, streaking the glass. Down on the tarmac near the service road, she saw a police cruiser with its lights flashing. Standing next to it, huddled in the rain without umbrellas, were two figures. One was holding a Louis Vuitton rolling bag that was now getting soaked. The other was slumped against the car head in hands. From the height of the 787's window, they looked tiny, insignificant. Nia watched them until the plane turned onto the active runway, and they disappeared from view. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and peace. She had walked into the airport as a suspect, a nuisance, a hood rat in the eyes of the crew. She was leaving as the owner. The engines spooled up to full power, pressing her back into her seat. The plane surged forward, gaining speed, rushing faster and faster until the ground fell away. They were airborne. Naya closed her eyes. The drama was on the ground. Up here in the sky, her father owned the air was finally clean. But she knew the real story wasn't over. For Brad and Jessica, the nightmare was just beginning. And for Nia, the real work changing the company that bore her name was about to start. The wheels of the Boeing 787 kissed the tarmac at Heathrow Airport just after 9:00 p.m. local time. The landing was smooth, far smoother than the emotional turbulence that had preceded it. As the plane taxied to the gate, the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin was unrecognizable compared to the chaotic scene in New York. The replacement crew moved with a terrified precision, treating Naya not just as a VIP, but as if she were made of fragile glass. When the cabin door opened, Naya didn't have to wait. The ground staff was already there, flanked by a private security detail her father had arranged. She walked down the jet bridge, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hoodie pulled up against the London chill. But this time, no one blocked her path. No one questioned her presence. The ground agents bowed their heads slightly as she passed a silent acknowledgement of the storm she had survived and the lightning bolts she had thrown. A black Range Rover was waiting on the tarmac, bypassing immigration queues entirely. As she sank into the leather-back seat, watching the rainy streets of London blur past Nia finally let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 7 hours. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt heavy. She had learned a lesson that no university lecture could teach. Power is a weapon, and it is terrifyingly easy to use. The dinner at the Shard. 30 minutes later, Nia walked into Aqua Shard, the ultra-exclusive restaurant located on the 31st floor of London's tallest building. The view was breathtaking, the city lights sprawling out like a sea of diamonds in the dark. Tobias Sterling was waiting at a private corner table. He stood up immediately, pulling his daughter into a tight embrace. For a moment, he wasn't the billionaire tycoon. He was just a dad who had been worried sick. "You look tired, kiddo," he said, softly, pulling out her chair. "I am," Naya admitted, grabbing the menu without looking at it. "I just want a burger, a really expensive burger." Tobias chuckled, signaling the waiter. Once the food was ordered and the wine poured, his expression shifted. The fatherly warmth remained, but the steel of the CEO surfaced in his eyes. "We need to talk about the fallout," Tobias said, his voice low. "Victoria briefed me. You handled the room well. Better than I would have. I probably would have fired the whole airport." "It wasn't the airport's fault," Naya said, tracing the rim of her water glass. "It was a culture, Dad. Jessica and Brad. They didn't just wake up today and decide to be bigots. They've been comfortable doing it for years. They felt safe." "They aren't safe anymore," Tobias said, his tone turning icy. "I want you to know exactly what happened after you took off. It wasn't just a firing, Naya. It was an erasure." He leaned in. Captain Miller tried to call his union rep before he even left the terminal. The union refused to take his call. We sent over the cockpit voice recordings within 10 minutes. He violated federal regulations by threatening a passenger with false arrest. The FAA has already suspended his license pending an investigation. I also made sure the legal team filed a civil suit for the operational delay costs. He's looking at bankruptcy before Christmas. Naya nodded slowly. "And Jessica, blacklisted," Tobias said simply. "Globally, we share a do not hire database with the major alliance, One World Star Alliance US team. Her name is on it. She won't be able to get a job checking bags at a bus station, let alone on a plane. She lost her severance package, her flight benefits, and because she was terminated for gross misconduct, she is ineligible for unemployment benefits. Naya looked out the window at the city. It sounded harsh. It was harsh. But then she remembered the way Jessica had looked at her sneakers. She remembered the way Mrs. van der Hoven had been encouraged to humiliate her. "Good," Nia said, her voice steady. "They wanted to enforce the rules. We just played by them." "Exactly." Tobias smiled, raising his glass. "To the new boss." "Not yet," Naya corrected him. She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. "I don't want to just punish them, Dad. I want to change the company. I wrote this on the plane. I'm calling it the Sterling Standard. No more profiling, blind recruitment for customer service roles. And I want to create a scholarship fund for pilots of color. We need to stop being a old boys club." Tobias took the notebook. He read the pages in silence for a long time. When he looked up, there was a sheen of tears in his eyes. "Approved," he whispered. "We start tomorrow." The hard fall. 6 months later. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, and for Captain Brad Miller, the balance was brutal. The man who used to command a $250 million aircraft was now standing in a humid, cramped office in a strip mall in Queens, New York. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit. He was applying for a job as a dispatcher for a local trucking logistics company. "So, Mr. Miller," the hiring manager said, chewing on a toothpick. He didn't look up from Brad's resume. "Says here you were a pilot for Aerolux. Big-time stuff. Why are you applying to schedule dump trucks?" Brad swallowed hard. The humiliation burned his throat like acid. I decided to make a career change, seeking new challenges." The manager chuckled. He typed Brad's name into Google. The first result wasn't his LinkedIn profile. It was a viral video titled "Billionaire's Daughter Grounds Racist Captain." It had 14 million views. The manager turned the screen around. "This you?" Brad's face went pale. There is context missing from that video." "Get out," the manager said, pointing to the door. "Please," Brad begged, his voice cracking. "I have legal bills. I lost my pension. I just need a job." "I don't hire liabilities," the manager said. "And I definitely don't hire idiots who mess with the money. Get out." Brad walked out into the cold rain. His car, a leased Mercedes, had been repossessed 2 months ago. He walked to the bus stop, waiting for the Q34 line. As the bus pulled up, the driver, a young black man, opened the doors. Brad fumbled for his change, dropping a quarter. He had to kneel on the wet pavement to pick it up, people stepping around him, grumbling at the delay. He looked up at the driver, expecting a reprimand. "Take your time, man," the driver said kindly. Brad lowered his head in shame, moved to the back of the bus and sat in the plastic seat. He was finally in economy. The waitress. 3 states away in a roadside diner off I-95 in New Jersey, the lunch rush was peaking. "Order up table 4 is waiting on their fries," the cook screamed. I'm going! Jessica yelled back, balancing 3 plates on her arm. Her feet were throbbing. She was wearing orthopedic shoes that were ugly but necessary because she was on her feet for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. She slammed the plates down at table 4. The customer, a woman in a business suit, frowned. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I asked for no pickles. This has pickles." Jessica felt a flash of her old arrogance rise up. She wanted to roll her eyes. She wanted to tell the woman to pick them off herself. But she couldn't. She needed this tip. Her rent was late, and she was currently sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment because she had to sell her furniture to pay off her credit cards. "I'm so sorry, Ma'am," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "I'll fix it right away. My mistake." She took the plate back to the kitchen. Tears stung her eyes. The grease from the fryer had ruined her skin, and her hair was a mess. She walked past the break room, where a small television was mounted on the wall. The local news was on. And finally today, the anchor announced Aerolux Airlines has reported record profits following their rebranding campaign. The Sterling Standard initiative, led by heiress Nia Sterling, has been credited with revitalizing the industry. Here is Nia Sterling at the gala in Paris last night. Jessica froze. On the screen, Nia looked magnificent. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue, the same color as the first-class cabin seats. She was smiling, shaking hands with the President of France. She looked powerful, graceful and kind. A younger waitress, a girl named Sarah, bumped into Jessica. "Wow," Sarah said, looking at the TV. "She's amazing, right? I read her story. She took down a whole crew of racist bullies on her own plane. Can you imagine being that cool?" Jessica stared at the screen. She remembered the feeling of holding that boarding pass. She remembered the look on Nia's face when she threw the backpack. "Yeah," Jessica whispered, her voice cracking. "Can you imagine?" "Hey, pickles," the cook yelled. Jessica snapped back to reality. She grabbed the plate of cheap fries. There was no champagne here. There was no lie-flat bed. There was just the smell of stale coffee and the relentless grinding weight of regret. She walked back out to the floor, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Here you go, ma'am," she said, placing the plate down. "Is there anything else I can get you?" "No," the customer said, not even looking at her. "Just the check." Jessica walked away, fading into the background, just another invisible server in a world she used to think she owned. And that, my friends, is what we should call absolute rock-bottom karma. Jessica and Brad thought their uniforms gave them the right to look down on people, but they forgot the golden rule. You never know who you're talking to. Nia didn't just win. She built a legacy while the people who tried to break her ended up serving fries and riding the bus. It just goes to show that arrogance is a loan, and eventually life comes to collect the debt with interest. I want to know your thoughts. Was the punishment too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Drop a comment below. I'll be replying to the best ones. If you loved this story, please destroy that like button, share this with a friend who needs some satisfaction, and subscribe for more stories of justice served hot. Thanks for watching.